Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So thank you for joining. This is Ayasubhijana Pasadi Vihara, and I'm very excited. And I was saying also humble to be sharing this sutta today. This is the middle-length discourses, Majjhima Nikaya number 18. It's the honey ball or honey cake sutta, and it's been written about and discussed quite extensively. So I'm going to share, like I was saying, most humbly my understanding of this sutta, and I'm going to do it in two parts because I think it is worthy of very more extensive exploration than an hour could lend itself. So I've prepared a document, but I've I think I want to just start going to the sutta directly. So I'm going to do a share screen now. And this should be the sutta. Get up to the top. Bhante Sujato has translated this as honey cake. Yeah, it's also been, Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as honey ball. And that's, that's not so important terminology difference. It's not so vital to consider. But I am going to consider some other words in the sutta a little more extensively. Excuse me. So I'm going to read through to a certain point and then go over to a document that I prepared. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sakyans near Kapila Watu in the banyan tree monastery. Then the Buddha robed up in the morning and taking his bowl and robe entered Kapila Watu for alms. He wandered for alms in Kapila Watu. After the meal, on his return from alms round, he went to the great wood for the day's meditation. Plunged deep into it and sat at the root of a young wood apple tree to meditate. Dandapani, the Sakyan, while going for a walk, plunged into the deep wood. He approached the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. So the Buddha was meditating, and this Dandapani approaches him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he stood to one side, leaning on his staff, and said to the Buddha, "What is the ascetic's doctrine? What does he assert?" So here, this person is named after the fact that he walks with a walking stick, is leaning leaning on a staff. He's standing in front of or to the side. This is stood, yeah, he did stand to one side. So it's a, not showing very much respect and this kind of gesture. What is the ascetic's doctrine? What does he assert? So the Buddha replies, "Respectable sir, my doctrine is such that one does not argue with anyone in the world, this world with its gods, maras, divinities, its population, with its ascetics and Brahmins, its gods and humans, and it is such that perceptions do not underlie the Brahman who lives detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state. That is my doctrine, and that is what I assert." When he had spoken, Dandapani shook his head, waggled his tongue, raised his eyebrows until his brow puckered into 3 furrows, and left, leaning on his staff. So I can't imagine. Can you imagine if you answer somebody's question and they respond in that way? And it seems like the Buddha was being polite. This is a word, respectable sir, awuso, sir, venerable. Sometimes it's translated as friend, but Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated that word as friend. But it's a polite address, and he says he does not argue with anyone. And some people feel that Dandapani was looking for a argument. He was looking to debate, like this is something that they love to do at the time of the Buddha, is they find the ascetics in the parks, and they come up and they try to assert their views and opinions. And I'm going to go to see if I can move this. Sometimes I might have to stop the screen share for a second. There, that's how I do it. And then I'm going to go over to the doctrine. I'm not doctrine, the document. There you go. I thought I could just change the tab, but it's not easy for me to do that for some reason. So here I have, I wanted to share this. This is in Bhante Sujato's notes also, but Venerable Nanda Nanda wrote this marvelous book that really goes into depth, into this sutta in depth, and particularly focusing on this word that has papancha in it. And we'll get to that word in this document. So the Dandapani is, this is a note from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, whose name was Stick in Hand, was so called because he used to walk around ostentatiously with a golden walking stick. This is in the commentaries. Even though he was still young and healthy, according to the commentaries, he sided with Devadatta, the Buddha's arch foe, when the latter attempted to create a schism in the Buddha's following. His manner of asking the question is arrogant and deliberately provocative. So just standing there with a stick in your hand is somewhat threatening even. So there's a minor Vinaya rule, training rule against teaching anyone with a staff in their hand. And the rule even has the word dandapani in it, stick in hand. This was evidently laid down because a staff could be used as a weapon. Even today it is. And hence was associated with royal authority or with policing and exercise of violence. So this is if you just use the tooltip notes or side notes, you'll find a lot of this notation. So this is notes from both the Wisdom publication translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, and Bhante Sujato. Here is the second one. And then I took not all of the translations of the word danda. Here's dandapani, with stick in hand, carrying a staff. And I just wanted to point out this word danda is used a number of ways, and it usually implies violence or conflict because it's their stick, truncheon, nightstick, club, walking stick, staff. So it can be used, assisting somebody's walking. But there's a lot of implications for violence, punishment, and the Jain word for kama. And this appears in the sutta the Buddha is discussing with one of the Niganthas, which later became known as the Jains. And they called kama rod. It's the translation of Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. He's called a rod. So because they try to burn off their bad karma by tormenting themselves, so punishing themselves. So here I have the extract again for the Lord Buddha's reply. Respectable sir, my doctrine is such that one does not argue with anyone in this world with its gods, maras, divinities, this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, its gods and humans, and it is such that perceptions do not underlie the Brahmin who lives detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state. So this is a pretty condensed teaching that the Buddha replied to Dandapani. And somebody in this other discussion I was in thought that Dandapani was just totally perplexed, and that's why he responded in that way, and that he wasn't really being aggressive. So I don't know. It is a lot to try and understand. If this is your first exposure to the Buddha's teaching, it would be pretty perplexing. This is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Friend, I assert and proclaim my teaching in such a way that does not quarrel with anyone in the world, with its gods, its maras, its brahmas, in this generation with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and people, in such a way that perceptions no more underlie that Brahmin who abides detached from sensual pleasures, without perplexity, shorn of worry, free from craving for any kind of being. So that's Bhante Bodhi's translation. So, yeah, this is something to ponder. So this from another sutta the Buddha is giving a teaching to the monks, and he says, I do not dispute with the world. It is the world that disputes with me. When your speech is in line with the teaching, you do not dispute with anyone in the world. So people may not agree with the Buddha, but he still proclaims his teaching. And he doesn't want to get in arguments. He just, this is the truth, you know. The Buddha is speaking, but people don't want to agree with it. A lot of people won't want to agree with it and want to debate with him. But he just wants to state his piece. And it is such that perceptions do not underlie that Brahman. So the Brahman who lives detached from sensual pleasures. So there's we'll get into it in a little while, but underlying tendencies. That are related. It's perceptions that underlie. They don't underlie this person. There's no underlying tendencies or perceptions. So you don't misperceive the world because we have these underlying perceptions of how things are. And then we would just respond from this confused perception of things. And living detached from sensual pleasure, so not craving, not wishing for sensual pleasure. So this is talking about the second noble truth here, I believe. And without indecision, so he's free from ignorance. So he has no reason for indecision, and no reason to worry because isn't attached to self, rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state. So this is my understanding of that. Since the Brahman is the Buddha, and he won't be reborn. He's given up rebirth. This is what we're attached to the world. So then we have these confused perceptions of the world, and this perpetuates our existence in samsara. So now I'm going to go back to the document. Let me see if I can move this. Okay. I think I can just go back to the sutta, I mean. So, so in the sutta, Dandapani had just kind of stormed off, I'm imagining. He exited on a stick, leaning on a stick. So then in the late afternoon, the Buddha came out of retreat and went to the banyan tree monastery, sat down on a seat spread out. So he was in a this means he left where he was meditating. I think that's why the Bhante Sujata has translated it that way. So he went to where the other monastics were, where the monks were, and he told the mendicants what had happened. When he had spoken, one of the mendicants said to him, "But sir, asserting what doctrine does the Buddha not argue with anyone in this world with its gods, maras, divinities, its population, with its ascetics and Brahmins, its gods and humans? And how is it that perceptions do not underlie the Buddha, the Brahman, who lives detached from sensual pleasures, without indecision, stripped of worry, rid of craving for rebirth in this or that state? So good questions. So Dandapani, if he was really perplexed and wanted to know, he could have started to ask the Buddha, what do you mean? What does that mean? um, so it's wonderful. This monk is wanting to know further what the Buddha meant by his statement. If I get that. Mendicant, judgments driven by proliferating perceptions beset a person. If they don't find anything worth approving, welcoming, or getting attached to in the source from which they arise, just this is the end of the underlying tendencies to desire, repulsion, views, doubt, conceit, the desire for continued existence, and ignorance. This is the end of taking up the rod and the sword, the end of quarrels, arguments, and disputes, of accusations, divisive speech, and lies. This is where these bad, unskillful qualities cease without anything left over. This is what the Buddha said. When he had spoken, the Holy One got up from his seat and entered his dwelling. So now I think I might be able to get back. Close your eyes a second. There it goes. Back to the document I've prepared. So the sutta continues that the monks start to ask, what did the Buddha mean by that? Who could we ask? It was still not clear to them. So this is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation here. In response to the mendicant or the monk or bhikkhu who asked the question, Bhikkhu, as to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation beset a person, a man, if nothing is found there to delight in, welcome, and hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust, the underlying tendency to aversion, the underlying tendency to views, the underlying tendency to doubt, the underlying tendency to conceit, the underlying tendency to desire for being, of the underlying tendency to ignorance. This is the end of resorting to rods and weapons of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malicious words, and false speech. Here, these evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. So, and then Bhikkhu Bodhi has a slightly different translation here. You can see Bhante Sujato says judgments, and Bhikkhu Bodhi says notions here. But the idea of proliferation, this word, papancha sanya sankha. So papancha is a kind of maybe a well-known word in Theravada Buddhist circles, and because of the sutta in particular. And it's mental proliferation or proliferation, proliferating. And this word sanya is translated as perception. And sanka has I've got this word broken up into different parts for translation, which I'll show in a minute. So if they don't find anything worth proving welcoming or getting attached to in the source from which they arise. So these mental proliferations come from something that is some kind of contact, which will be discussed later in the sutta. But he doesn't talk about the source right here, and I think this is why the monks seek out somebody to find more explanation about the Buddha's statement. So the Buddha always talks about us to look at where things arise from, and maybe he didn't give the reason, the source to the monks for them to be able to try to explore that for themselves. Well, where did these mental proliferations come from? And there's that sutta that we discussed last week, the Vitaka Santana has these 5 different ways to calm down our thinking. And one is to trace back, if our mind is really agitated, trace back and see where the source of this mental proliferation came from. So we can do that for ourselves, like looking. I remembered, I go back in the chain of thoughts, and then I go say, oh, it's because of some desire I had, or some irritation I had, or something. And the mind got very agitated. So proving welcoming or getting attached to the source from which they arise. And then here we have the 7 underlying tendencies listed. And I thought it was interesting too, in this word here, danda, the ending of taking up the rod. So danda here is translated as rod. So it's definitely a weapon, rod and the sword. So this danda satta. I think that's the sword is here. The end of quarrels, arguments and disputes, accusation, divisive speech, and lies. So the mind gets agitated. And what struck me is it's this we are beset by our own thinking. We're assailed or agitated by our own thinking. So this mental proliferation overwhelms. We are overwhelmed by this proliferation of thinking, and then we're driven to get into conflict. We don't have to be, but people are. This is what drives people into warfare. In the time of the Buddha, people were picking up swords and rods and fighting with one another, or quarreling or arguing So it's getting milder as it goes down, disputes, accusations, divisive speech, and lies. But violence can arise from the mind being overwhelmed by this kind of thinking. So it's more than just the wandering mind. If we're sitting, a lot of times people think that papancha means just the mind is wandering here and there and that. It's more that we're obsessed by something and then we're like end up plotting. It's like this whole scenario and what we're going to do and what we're going to say and how we're going to get or end. Either we are trying to destroy what we don't want or obtain what we do want. And so there's this whole mental proliferation around that. So proliferation of opinions, concepts, and constructs, classification of diverse perceptions. So this is two different translations of this compound word. And then I broke up the word so we could get the meaning of I think I have Sanka here. How did I do with it? So papancha is various opinions, proliferation, endless conceptualization. And it literally means expanding or spreading. So our thoughts are just kind of expanding and spreading, taking over our awareness. And sanya, here's Sanka. Perception, conception, recognition, and it's a third of the 5 aggregates. And literally it's knowing together. And sanya is also name, label, concept, idea, notion, impression, representation, symbol. So this is the working of the mind. So we're perceptions and notions is what Bhikkhu Bodhi says. And Sanka is interesting. It's measurement, enumeration, calculation. There was like 7 or something translations. I was found the one that would seem most relevant to this compound word and how it's being used. So this one word, I think, has a whole chapter in this book, concept, the book up here, Concept and Reality in Early Buddhist Thought. This Venerable Jnanananda goes into a lot of detail. So sorry to be scrolling around like this. And here are the underlying tendencies. And I think I mentioned earlier, the honey ball or honey cake sutta is one of the few suttas that lists all 7 of the underlying tendencies, unless it's just saying there are these 7 and doesn't give very much detail about it. And this sutta here is in the Kanda Samyutta. No, maybe not. That's not it. It's in another. Anyway, so here's a list of the suttas. It's just it's in the Magga Samyutta. It lists them, but it has more. There's another one that does have more teaching. It's in the Kanda Samyutta, but this is a list. There are these 7 underlying tendencies. The underlying tendency of sensual desire, repulsion, views, doubt, conceit, desire to be reborn, and ignorance. This is Bhante Sujata's translation of them. So that we have kama, raga, nusaya, sensual desire, repulsion, patigha, nusayo, views, ditta, nusayo, doubt, vichikicha, nusayo, conceit, mana, nusayo, desire to be reborn, bhava, nusaya, and ignorance, avidya, nusayo. So the desire to be reborn, ignorance, and craving, I believe. The asawas, the taints. And these keep us in samsara, all 7 of these kind of gang up on us and keep us in samsara. And this sutta says the Noble Eightfold Path should be developed for the direct knowledge and complete understanding, finishing and giving up of these 7 underlying tendencies. So these are important to know. And it's important to understand what it means. It's dormant. They could be dormant tendencies. It's latent tendencies is another translation of the anusaya. But what happens is they are lying dormant, or they're underlying. It says see if I got here. This is important too. They're good to know, memorize these 7, because we can see them being triggered. It's like sense contact, and the sutta gets into that later. And I'm not going to finish the sutta today, but I am going to mention that there is this relationship between sense contact and feeling that arises at sense contact, and all 7 of the underlying tendencies. But this is these are the primary underlying tendencies. Pleasant. Okay, I'll just read this whole thing. The underlying tendency for greed underlies pleasant feeling. The underlying tendencies for repulsion underlies painful feeling. The underlying tendency for ignorance underlies neutral feeling. These primary underlying tendencies are related to 3 kinds of Vedana. I think I probably put this together because I cut this from another. Pleasant feeling is Sukha Vedana, and it's related to Kama Raga Nusaya. An unpleasant feeling, Dukkha Vedana, Patigha Nusaya. And neutral feeling, Adukkha Asukha Vedana, Avijja Nusaya. So it's going to describe how this whole process happens in the second part of this sutta, but we don't have time. I like to have some time for discussion and to focus a little bit more on the underlying tendencies. So, like I was saying, that these 3, the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feeling, triggers the arising of these 3 primary underlying tendencies. And then you could imagine with especially feelings that arises from the mind, of thoughts, memories, and such, will trigger these other ones: doubt, conceit, desire to be reborn, And ignorance is like it's the primary. That would also trigger doubt. Ignorance would is related to conceit, and then the bhava, the desire to be reborn, the sensual desire, because we want continued sensual pleasures. We're afraid of letting go. We don't think about the unpleasant in the future life. Maybe we maybe fear that, but we would desire a pleasant rebirth. And that's also just the unknown, not knowing what happens after we die, trying to imagine something that's comforting, like a heaven or something like that to be reborn in. So I think I'd like to open this up for discussion because it's really important sutta, and maybe people have questions. So I'm going to stop the screen share unless somebody wants to look at something. But if you have do you have a question? Anyone live in the Zoom audience? You can unmute yourself if you have a question. You understand all of this well?
Hello, I thank you for the organizing and explaining all this. Really so helpful every week. Thank you for all your studies and sharing, teaching. Um, if I a question I
Yes.
knowing, I think a lot of times it's choosing before we get involved in some things, that are we like, for example, my mother, I'm helping right now, and it's really the responsibility versus uh how it affects me. Am I really being helpful? It's agitating my mind. It's causing a lot of these troubles for me. So I'm thinking maybe I should think a little better, more, which I do, but how to decide how much to do or not, I think I want to help people, but yet, I need to not not have it harm, my mind. And anyway, I am looking back, like you said last week, look at the 5 ways that to, anyway, so I think that's a big thing for me is to apply it is if it's getting maybe if it's to see it, to use mindfulness to see it and the trouble in my mind, and then back off or take, is probably what's needed. And then there's time limits on things, which is something I noticed. I get pressured by the time somebody has a deadline, not my life, not my deadline, but their deadline, the deadline of so, and I get pressured by that, allow myself. So anyway, I think as my mother, how to decide. Anyway, it this is a common struggle, I think, for people, but so I don't know if there's a way to apply it to this. I'm
Yeah,
sure there is. Thank you.
so you can watch your mind and you can see yourself possibly being worked up, and maybe the idea of these underlying tendencies is we get overwhelmed by them. And we have to look at, we haven't gotten to where I touched on the source, with the feeling, a pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings really color all the other underlying tendencies. And these are triggered, and then it perpetuates the mental proliferation. The idea is that just it's endless. It's endless. We're trying to find a solution, and we keep going on and on in our mind. It's not like mental wandering, like I said, but it's more like there's some issue that we have, and then we're trying to solve it, and it's a searching, like kind of running here and running there. They're very similar in a way to the hindrances, but they're active in our daily life, and what motivates us to get into a lot of trouble. I think is one of the things. I can share these again. That might be a good thing to do, so we can look at them. Um, I mean, we can what if we have this list memorized, and we can see what's arising frequently. For me, the patiga, it's translated here as repulsion, but it's aversion, anger. It's the whole negativity. And then this one Bhante, this Sri Lankan bhikkhu, I don't remember his name right now, said that we should just be aware of which of these 7 underlying tendencies arise frequently, and how they're triggered. And it's almost like I'm looking for something to complain about. I see that in myself where uh I keep, with my mind is tending frequently towards this patiga. Then I see um it's um it's a strong tendency for myself. It may be for um Wichikichi was the doubt, like, what should I do about the situation with my mother? How can I solve it? What can I do? And so the mind is agitated, trying to find an answer, kind of running here and there, trying to solve it, how do I stop how do I stop my mind from going on and on and on about that? Um, Some people are very much motivated by sense desire, and that gets them into a lot of trouble. And some of these is not just internal mental the proliferation, but it leads into some kind of action. So uh, trying to get as much as you can, or for someone who's more aversive would be getting into verbal conflict or physical conflict. Uh, Maybe for me, I would be criticizing somebody, but mostly it's internalized for me. I see it even during retreat time. This is the perfect time to see what our underlying tendencies are, because we've limited our activities, and we're not speaking to other people. So then we see these things arising in ourselves. The conceit and the desire to be reborn, or more subtle, and the Ouija is the ignorance is very fundamental. It's kind of like the base of all of the other ones. Um, and this is what leads us into rebirth. Um, it's almost like you could, well, these two reinforce each other. The bhava, the desire to be reborn, and the Ouija keeps us really strongly in samsara. But if we see a situation like Susan is talking about with her mother and what's going on and why can't I let go of thinking about it? We might consider, well, what is the underlying tendency that's being triggered here by all of this? I don't see worry in this. Worry and restlessness is not in this list, and that's a hindrance. But it's almost like yeah, either desire for things being a particular way. That could even be in this Bhava raga, because Bhante Sujatu is translated as desire to be reborn, but it's desire for continuation, even in this things to be a particular way, like even like wishing a situation to be a particular way. So, and how much conceit is in the situation? You can just look at the list and think, does this how does it apply to my situation? And how is it that I'm not able to let go? Because some of it is that we think we're going to solve a problem by our thinking. And we're going to solve the problem. And so then it just, the proliferation is endless. We're always constructing, we're coming up with concepts and opinions, and it just, the ball keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. So, so we can use the underlying tendencies by just identifying them within ourselves and what's triggering, which one of the three types of feeling is triggering. Is it am I annoyed? Am I wishing for a more pleasant experience? Or just the unpleasant, the dullness. Um, we're just lost in some kind of a fog. And so doubt arises, um, or we may be tangled up in our views. So I hope that's helpful. I don't know if Locke might have a question or comment.
I do have a question.
Yes?
And that is, once you've identified one of the tendencies, is that when you can start to apply what we learned from the other sutta about the 5 techniques to replace them? Or do we want to just observe them for the time being and understand that they're possibly motivating some of our actions?
I think that the tracing back one is a good, like what has triggered, because there's an underlying tendency has been triggered by something, by some sense stimulus, either at the, any of the 5 physical senses or by an idea. And it's usually a thought or idea, a memory or something. But that's often triggered by something else, like the sense of smell. Like sometimes I'll smell some detergent and I'll remember being in my aunt's home in Guatemala, or diesel fumes. I remember being in Guatemala because it's like a really, strong diesel smell in the environment or something like that. And so then there's the memory of being with Tia Marta and wanting to see her again and longing or something. And so the desire for something arises. So you could see, okay, so I'm off on some kind of fantasy about how to get back to Guatemala or something like that. And how did I get there? Or I'm very irritated about something. So you trace back and go, oh, okay. This is if it's something, especially something very unwholesome, to trace back. But I think one of the more important things is just to see what we're prone to. Are we, maybe some people are more prone to doubt or to their views, and they get into a lot of conflict. They'll just hear something on the radio and then they get all angry and upset because they're very strong, or something on the internet, see something, a very strong opinion about something, and ranting and raving in their minds about a situation. Some people are very prone to strong views, and then they get into conflict with other people because they have even like a view about what to do with a sponge in the kitchen. Should you even have sponges at all? I know if you've lived in communal situations, there's really strong views about sanitation and how to do things and all that. So then if you see, my tendency is to have really strong views, and to not take it as seriously. I think it's when you start to look at the workings of the mind, and you realize that my opinion is just an opinion, and then you start to question it, and then it weakens it. My view, my opinion, and this is all wound up. Also, these overlap, like the conceit and the views reinforce one another. My view is best. I have the best understanding of things, and so my view is best. And so that reinforces the views. So you see how they interact. Um, so yeah, I don't know about replacing, unless it's something like sense desire, uh, or the patiga, like I did when I noticed that I was very strongly prone to the anusaya that's very strong for me is patiga. I did start doing metta bhavana more, just generally, but not to counter it directly, if that makes sense. I saw the tendency in myself, bringing awareness to that tendency and seeing how often it arises, but then doing the metta bhavana as a separate practice, but an ongoing practice to help. It's not like directly opposing the aversive tendency with metta, and then you end up with more aversion. It's more like when the aversion isn't so strong, then you try to develop a heart of loving kindness, a heart of compassion, a heart of forgiveness, and because underlying tendencies are really powerful, and they're not something that can just be, it would be more masking it over temporarily than really uprooting it. So yeah, so it wouldn't be directly opposing, but it's more, this is more of like an insight practice where we're trying to unravel.
Unravel or diffuse.
Diffuse and unravel, yeah. Yeah. And just bringing our awareness to it, the mindfulness to it, and looking at it directly helps diffuse it. Yeah. And then eventually we unravel it. The panya, the wisdom, the knowledge is what is going to finally completely unravel it. So I'm going to stop the screen share. So it's 9 o'clock. So I probably should stop for now, but thank you for your kind attention. And yeah, I'm going to the second half will continue next week. It'll go in more into the insight practice that's related to the sutta. And yeah, so we'll just review quickly. We'll go through the first part, and then we'll get more deeply into the second part that has really more how to work with these underlying tendencies and finding liberation of the heart. So thank you for your attention, and we can close with homage to the Triple Gem. If you care to join me. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Thank you again for joining.